How much does illegal migration matter to you? The government's determination to stop the boats has caused serious splits and high-level resignations within the party. Is it all worth it? To debate that and more, we're in the Cambridgeshire city of Peterbourgh, a place that's flipped between the two main parties for decades. Our audience here tonight is a broad reflection of the electoral map of the nation. They also want to ask, should we be scared of a second Trump presidency? And in Veganuary, should we all be giving up meat? Welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, Bin Akalami is Economic Secretary to the Treasury, having been handed the role by Rishi Sunak late last year. A former corporate lawyer, he's been an MP since 2017 and previously worked for Liz Truss when she was Foreign Secretary. Labour's Emily Thornberry was elected to Parliament 18 years ago. She was Shadow Foreign Secretary for 4 years before running unsuccessfully for party leader in 2020. She is now Shadow to what is effectively the government's in-house lawyer, the Attorney General. Kate McCann is a self-styled northerner and political editor at Times Radio. She also presents the station's Sunday morning programme. Before that, she had stints in political journalism at Talk TV, Sky and the Daily Telegraph. And by his own admission, Hashim Mohammed went to some of the worst schools in the country and was raised on state benefits. That was after arriving here at the age of 9 as an unaccompanied child refugee. Now he's a successful barrister, presents radio documentaries and has written 2 books, one about social mobility, the other about housing. Good evening. Welcome to our panellists. Welcome to our audience here in Peterborough. Great to see you. And, of course, welcome to you at home. We are available, as always, on BBC iPlayer and on BBC Sounds. And the conversation, no doubt, has already got underway on social media, so you can join in that too. But let's take our first question tonight, which is from Christina Morris.
Hi. Is the government right in continuing to push the Rwanda plan? Is all the money, time and resignations worth the proposed outcomes?
So, the government managed to get the Safety of Rwanda bill through the latest stage in the House of Commons, but 11 Conservative MPs rebelled, 18 abstained, and, of course, notably the former Home Secretary and the former Immigration Minister rebelled. Bin, is it worth it?
I think it is, and the reason why it is because it's a key part of our plan, not the only part, but a key part to tackle illegal migration. And it's very, very important that people appreciate that the Supreme Court a few months ago did strike down elements of the plan. We've signed a treaty with Rwanda to make sure that we've dealt with their criticisms and their concerns, and that this plan will work. The Attorney General is convinced it will work. The Prime Minister is convinced it will work. There are many experts that also believe it can work. And taken together with the other things we're doing, we've done agreements with France and Albania. We're increasing the National Crime Agency's budget. We're processing over 112,000 asylum claims this year, which is more than any year since 2002. Taken together with all of those things, it can make a big dent in our plan to tackle illegal migration. And indeed, in the last year, we've brought down illegal boat crossings down by 1/3. In the European Union, they've gone up by 1/3, showing that this is a problem that many countries are struggling with, and we've got the right plan.
So you say it will work. You've got the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, and the former Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, saying it won't.
They're entitled to their views.
Well, you think they might know?
But so would the Attorney General, so would the Prime Minister, so would the current Home Secretary, who was Foreign Secretary as well. So, look, politics is to some degree about competing views and arguments. That is part of any political party and indeed any government. As you said, only 11 Conservative MPs rebelled on this. That is, out of 360-odd MPs, that's quite a small number. The party is united behind this plan, and hopefully it will get through the House of Lords.
It's far more than that, submitted amendments, as you know. Emily?
I think if anybody was in any doubt that what limits the number of people coming over in small boats, they just need to look at the fact that for 27 days, at the end of December into January, there weren't any boats. And that's because not only was it freezing cold, but the wind was so strong. And only when the wind dropped this week did people get into the boats. And, of course, it continued to be cold. And we saw a boat go down. And in fact, it didn't even go down in the middle of the channel. It went just a very short distance from the shore. You could stand on the shore and see people drowning. And they drowned in water that was freezing cold. It was so shallow that some of the boats that were supposed to be rescuing them couldn't rescue them. And what makes me so angry is that whilst all of that is going on, we think of who it is that's organised these boats and put these people in, because quite frankly, once they're in a boat, do these gangs care? What happens? Of course they don't care. They do not care whether they live or die. They're in the boat, they're on their way, they've given them the money, and that's that. And what are we doing? We're allowing ourselves to be distracted by a bit of nonsense in Westminster, which we know is not going to work. It was never going to work. And the idea that we have spent £400 million on sending nobody to Rwanda so that the government can say, oh, we're doing something about it, and let's blame everybody else. Oh, it's the courts that have stopped us. Oh, it's the Labour Party that stopped us. Oh, it's the House of Lords that stopped us. No. You have not been smashing the gangs, which is what you should be doing, and that is what you should be focusing on. And if we could have just spent a bit of that time and money focused on actually putting a cell into the National Crime Agency, making sure we got the best people in there, we put some decent money into it. We knew that first and foremost we had to stop the boats coming over, because of course we should not be having anyone in a small boat risking their life trying to come to the UK.
So Labour's policy is in part, as you say, to use Keir Starmer's phrase, which he's repeated many times, to smash the gangs.
Yes.
What makes you think that you can succeed where any European country with a coastline has failed?
Because what we need to be doing is we need to be putting a great deal more effort into it than we do at the moment.
But do you think they're not? What ways do you think that you can succeed where all these other countries, Italy, for example, has failed?
Yeah, so I think this current government has not. I think the situation in Italy is going to be different to the situation in Britain. We have our particular circumstances, but what we need to do is we need to be putting a lot more effort in than they have been putting in at the moment. And it's as if they already know that they've failed. Do you know what? Right? Do you know that we're going to send them off to Rwanda, oh, it's going to work. Do you know that where they were going to send it from was an airport called Boscombe Down, right? And it isn't even ready as an airport. In fact, I asked a question in Parliament saying, has anybody gone from the Home Office to check to see how they're doing? And in the last year, not a single person, either a minister or an official, has gone to Boscombe Down to find out how they're doing. And then on top of that, they don't even have any planes. They are playing with us.
Okay,
and they are not focusing on the real issue.
It's not right. And
I'm sure that if you were a minister, you would take it. If you were a Home Office minister, you would have taken it seriously, and you would have at least gone to check to see if Boscombe Down was appropriate as an airport and whether it was even going to work. Well, but they're messing around in the Home Office.
Has no one gone to check if the planes can actually take off?
I do not know the movements of all my Home Office colleagues. What I do know is that this plan has been worked on. A huge amount of effort has gone into this plan. A huge amount of time has gone into this plan. In fact, the question was almost, is it worth it? I'm saying it is worth it.
No, you've answered that,
it's not lack of effort, is what I'm trying to say.
Let's hear from our audience. Lots of hands up. Yes, the man at the back in a black T-shirt, I think. Yeah.
So I just want to ask, is we spent millions, hundreds of millions of pounds on this project. Even the leader of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, has said, well, it might not be even worth doing this anymore. So what point do we kind of hold up our hands and go, this policy hasn't worked? Yeah. And what point do we kind of go, we've got to hold up our hands, we've got to go, this cannot work anymore, this isn't economically viable?
Yeah. The woman in the blue top.
Yeah, I heard recently that there's only going to be about 500 people a year going to Rwanda, and it's a reciprocal arrangement as well, so some can come back to us. Now, I just can't see how that's a good choice of taxpayers' money spent.
OK, and the man in the glass is just a little bit in front of you.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of money so far, and we've given a lot of money to France. Is there not any merit in trying to put some sort of situation in France, on the coast of France, where we can monitor what's going on, and then start to prevent some of the boats coming over? Because everybody says we're going to stop get the gangs, but we can't get the gangs because we're not where the gangs are. The gangs are in France, working over there. Can we not have some agreement with France where we can better suit what we're trying to do there?
OK, the woman here in the green sweater.
I think so much focus gets spoken about the money that we're spending on this, but actually why are the government not learning about the Pacific Solution Policy implemented by Australia? And actually, I think we lose focus on the conditions that those refugees and asylum seekers were living in, and the government now accepting that we want people to live in those conditions. I think it's disgusting.
OK, Hashi.
The question talked about whether it will work. It won't.
What you're saying is worth it. Is it worth the proposal?
Is it worth it? We know it's not worth it. You know it's not worth it. I'm sure Bim really deep down in his heart knows it's not worth it. And yet, let's think about what's happening right now. First things first, it's important to acknowledge that people are really concerned about the boats crossings and so many people are dying and something has to be done. I think any rational person agrees on that level. 2 years ago, I travelled to Dresden, the German town, and I met an Eritrean man who had been deported from Israel to Rwanda. He'd been paid to go to Rwanda. Rwanda had a reciprocal arrangement with Israel to take refugees. When he got there, the Rwandans said, "You don't need to stay. There's the door." And he used the money that he was given to make his way back, that treacherous journey, and he made his way to Dresden, where he sought asylum again. The Supreme Court in Israel struck down that law. And when we got to our Supreme Court, there's a passage by our learned judges where they said the Home Office hadn't even assessed the Israel-Rwanda policy before they decided to adopt it. So we know it's not going to work. It's unviable. It's expensive. And the only person it's working for is the Rwandans, because they won't give us a penny back. And what we're seeing right now, instead of them actually dealing with this properly and actually having some real ideas, do you know what they're doing? They're attacking our judges. They're attacking our rule of law. They are dividing a society. They are making us feel like refugees are the scum and who are foreign. They refer to the European courts that we are a part of that have United Kingdom judges as foreign courts. It's not only just disgusting, as this young lady was saying, it's unconscionable. The rhetoric is poison, and we have to acknowledge that. And absolutely, I end where I started, which is this is an issue that we need to grapple with. The gentleman talked about the French authorities. The French authorities have offered for us to station ourselves over there, provided we pay. Imagine how much we could have used for that £400,000 on that side of the channel. 400 million, I beg your pardon, for us to be on that side of the channel to monitor it. Instead, this week, with everything that's happening in the world, everything that's happening in this country, this week our Prime Minister spent his precious time dealing with the loonies in his parties. It's unconscionable.
Okay. So, Hashi says, very powerfully, you know it's not worth it. He's talking about all of you. Are there any people here who do support the Rwanda policy? The government clearly feels that it has popularity. Yes, the man here?
We need to have something in place. I'm not sure I agree with every single aspect of the Rwanda plan, but at the same time I feel a little bit cheated as a Brexit voter. I wanted us to take back control of our borders, our laws. But as we've seen this week, you know, it's difficult to even get this passed through our own parliament, not to mention the European laws and everything else that we're tied into still. You know, so I have to say, I'm not too sure, but Emily's very quick to criticise the plan. But then what's your plan? You know, there has to be a plan. We're a small island. We haven't got room for everyone. I don't knock anybody that's wanting to come to the UK for a better life. We would all do that if it was better for us to go somewhere else, and some do. But at the end of the day, there has to be a plan to sort this problem out.
OK. So I'll come back to you in a minute. Let me just hear a bit more of it. The man there in the sort of blue pattern shirt, yeah.
Yes, so what I wanted to ask was, surely the issue is how did the people who are catching the boats get to Calais in the first place? Because they've travelled thousands of miles, gone through several European countries to get to Calais. Shouldn't what we'd be looking at is how that can happen and how we could stop it happening?
And do you support the government in its... Do you think it's a good idea, the government plan to send people to Rwanda?
I understand the principles that they're trying to put forward, but one, I'm not sure that the amount of people that you can send to Rwanda under the present arrangement is enough to deter the boat people. But we do need something in place that is going to deter people just flocking to Calais to get a boat to come over here. When they're in France, they've probably come through Spain, or they may have come through Italy. You know, why did they go through these countries to get to Calais and camp out to try and get a boat?
OK. So, Kate, let me remind you of the question. Is the government right in continuing to push the Rwanda plan? Is it worth all the money, the time and the resignations?
Yeah, the question, is it worth it? It's a really interesting one. There's been some YouGov polling done in the last couple of days, specifically Conservative voters. They were asked, is it value for money? 34% said no, 32% said yes. Should we adapt or scrap the plan? 46% said yes, only 37% wanted to keep it as it is right now. So even among Conservative voters, this Rwanda plan is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. But I think the conversation that we're having here today opens up some much bigger questions about what kind of country we want to be, but also about legal migration. We're talking here about illegal migration, about people crossing the channel. The gentleman there said, I voted for Brexit, I wanted to take back control of the borders. But taking back control means really different things to different people, particularly in this context around immigration. And when you start getting into the moral argument and how you feel about something like this kind of policy, it gets very difficult. I think that our politics has failed to be able to debate and talk about this in a way that is helpful for policy. And I think there are a number of reasons for that. I think we've had a couple of big votes in the last couple of years that people wanted change, 2016, 2019, and that people feel that they didn't get it. But I think on the specifics of the Rwanda policy, you've got a Prime Minister who's very good at the detail. He can give you lots of statistics. But he hasn't so far, in the view of many people, made the argument for this policy. He hasn't taken some of the arguments against it and really tried to explain why this is the right way forward. I think he's lost heart in this policy, if I'm honest.
He never believed in it.
And I think the problem for the Conservative Party that flows from this is that what you can see now is the Tory party is losing heart too. And I think that that becomes very difficult to turn around.
Bim, are you losing heart? Is the Prime Minister losing heart? Is this a poisonous debate, as Hashi is saying?
Well, look, I'll take the losing heart and then I'll come on to Hashi's comments. Look, as I said in my remarks, this is a key part of the policy, but it is not the only thing we are doing. And frankly, my frustration with how this whole issue has been debated is that it's almost been so emphasised that we haven't been able to explain the agreement we've made with Albania, where the number of removals to Albania is now, the number of people coming from Albania in illegal migration is down by 93%.
I think the government's talked about that quite a lot.
OK, fine. Well, we haven't been able to talk about... Emily mentioned the National Crime Agency. We've doubled the number of people looking at this, trying to deal with this problem, the National Crime Agency, and there are all sorts of other things we are doing. Yes, we've had to have a big vote in Parliament. Yes, it was difficult to get through Parliament, as the gentleman said earlier, but that doesn't mean that it isn't going to have an impact, particularly in terms of the deterrent effect, which I believe will happen. Now, do I think that this one thing will mean that there'll be absolutely nobody crossing the channel? I think that that's difficult.
But isn't that the point? It's about stopping the boats.
But what we're trying to do is to reduce the number significantly. We've already done it.
Hang on a bit, in fairness. When the Prime Minister stands up at his podium, as he did this morning, what it says is stop the boats, not stop almost all the boats.
OK. Well, look. What I'm trying to say, if we're talking about this Rwanda bill, it is a key part of what we're doing. This is going to make a significant difference, but it is not the only thing we are doing. There are other building blocks to this plan. So my point is that the Rwanda issue does not in and of itself fix the problem. All the other things we are doing and will continue to do, and hopefully we will double our efforts on, all of those things taken together will make a significant impact in dealing with this problem. And I think that the gentleman earlier on, talking about Emily's comments, I think he made a very fair point.
Well, let's let Emily answer that.
We have a clear plan. There are several things we are doing, and the Labour Party just criticises without setting out...
OK, well, let's let Emily answer that. So, reasonably briefly, if you would. Yes, but the man here saying, you know, you've got to have...
Yeah, so so first of all, we need to crush the gangs, and therefore, of course, we need to not only improve what we're doing. Prosecutions of these gangs in Britain has gone down by a third. We need to also work internationally, of course we do, and we need to be able to work against a background of trust and make sure that we're exchanging information and work together and have projects together in order to be able to crush the gangs. And, of course, the further back upstream that we can stop people, the better, for everyone's sake. So we need to be able to do that. We need to be able to have a proper returns policy. Yes, we've now got an agreement with Albania, but we need to be able to have a functioning asylum system, which means that we don't have a backlog of 100,000 people. We are not spending £8 million a day keeping people in hotels. They designated 5,000 people who were supposed to be designated as people who might go to Rwanda, and they have lost 4,250 of them. We need to have an asylum policy that people have faith in, that works properly. So, as frankly, it did under the last Labour government. Hello? We didn't have these sorts of problems then because we had a proper returns policy. We had a policy that was firm and fair and fast. And it has fallen to pieces under this government. Right. And all they're trying to do is distract people by this gimmick of Rwanda.
Right. I think we'll probably be coming back to this subject over the next few months, so I'm going to end it there for now. I just want to let you know at home where we're going to be next week, which is Gillingham in Kent, and the following week we are in Glasgow. So if you'd like to come to either the Gillingham programme or the Glasgow programme, go to the Question Time website, details are here, and you can follow all the instructions, and who knows, you could be sitting here instead of watching it on the sofa at home. Anyway, right, let's take our next question now, which is from Marion Durose.
I am truly scared of what a second Trump presidency may mean for international relations, the planet we call home, and society at large. Are you?
Well, Donald Trump, as I'm sure you're all aware, won the Republican nomination in Iowa. He's got many more stages to go through, but he won the first one this week by some considerable margin, and he's also doing very well in the polls. Emily, should we be scared? Are you scared?
I think we have to face facts that he might end up getting re-elected, and I think we need to be ready. I have always had a bit more of Angela Merkel in me when it comes to my attitude to Donald Trump than perhaps Theresa May. I think that what you have to do...
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning that you shouldn't kowtow to him. Meaning that the only thing that he respects is people standing up to him and showing a bit of strength. I think that you must not let him push you around, and you have to be clear about what it is that you think.
So you called him in the past a racist and sexual predator destroying the world order. Do you mean say that to his face? I mean, Labour wants to be in government. If you are in government, are these the kind of comments you're going to make to his face?
I think you have to you have to work with him, and you have to say no to him. And you have to say, that's not right. That is dangerous. We are friends to America, and you are doing the wrong thing, and we want to be able to work with you, but you can't do this. I mean, that's what you need to do. That's how friends need to be able to speak to one another. And if he gets elected, he gets elected, and we work with him because we have to. But we have to be truthful, and we have to be strong.
Bim, are you scared?
No, I'm not scared, but I think one has to be wary, and I think that what one has to be able to do is... I agree with Emily in terms of we have to work with whoever, and not just in America. All sorts of countries have leaders that we may, find unsavoury. But as a government, you have to be able to, in the interests of the British people, work with absolutely everybody. But at the same time, we've got to make sure that we can separate out the person who happens for 4 years to be the head of state and all of our deep cooperation and friendship with the institutions of the United States, which we should have faith in, we should have confidence in, their military, their intelligence agencies, all the cooperation that happens between our two countries. I do have faith in those things, notwithstanding, even if Donald Trump is elected.
So you're effectively saying, as Emily is, should the Conservatives be in government, should Labour be in government, we have to work with him.
Of course.
David Cameron has described his behaviour as protectionist, xenophobic and misogynistic. You have described him as a cancer at the heart of US politics. Now, he doesn't strike... I don't know Donald Trump, but he doesn't strike me as a man who takes insults well. How is that going to work?
Actually, if you look
Say sorry.
If you look... Well, no. No, I don't need to say sorry.
So you stand by that?
What I would say...
That the possible future president of the United States is a cancer at the heart of US politics.
What I would say is Donald Trump himself in the primary process that he's going through and has been through in the past, has said all sorts of things about all sorts of other people, some of whom then later served in his cabinet and in his government.
So you mean, oh, Donald didn't really mean it? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is, in politics, people, you have views, but you still have to be able to work with people. And I'm afraid that that is just, you know, how it goes if you're in government.
Interesting. OK, woman there in the classes.
I agree with you, Emily. I think, you know, the best thing to do is to stand up to, you know, people that are bullies, that intimidate people through power. But let's face it, this is not Love Actually. Have we really got a Prime Minister in Cabinet right now who is willing and capable to stand up to Donald Trump?
No. But we will, hopefully.
Man here.
I think one of the things I'm most concerned about is the post-truth element that also comes with Trump as well. I mean, we've already, without wanting to harp back, we've already got a government that's legislating reality with the Rwanda bill. What I'd like to hear from the panel is what they would do in this new kind of post-truth world we've got coming to try and stop that wave that's coming.
OK, let me hear the woman in glasses there.
Emily, can you be honest in saying that you think Keir Starmer will be able to handle Donald Trump if you don't think Rishi Sunak will be able to?
Yeah.
How?
Because I've known Keir for decades. I've known Keir for more than 30 years. And I know him to be a truthful, upstanding and strong individual. And I think if anybody would, you know, and who wants to put the country first. And so I think that he is exactly the person we need to have as Prime Minister if we were to have Donald Trump as President.
So, Kate, Marian's question is... It lists the various things she's scared of about the Trump presidency for international relations, the planet, society at large. Now, clearly, we've got a war in Ukraine at the moment. Donald Trump has said he'll end that in a day. He's talked about drill, baby, drill from day one. Whether that means oil or more fracking is not clear. What's your view in terms of, you know, what you think Trump might do and how we should respond to it?
Yeah, there are some people who are very deeply worried about what Donald Trump would be like if he got back in again a second time around. There are experts who say that he felt the first time he was too willing to go along with the views of the people around him. He almost tempered some of the things that he wanted to do, and that if he did win a second term, that he wouldn't do that. He would do what he wants to do, go with his gut, surround himself with people who are very similar to himself, which I think is why people are feeling the way they feel about, you know, the concerns. And it's worth adding that, Bim, the end of your quote about the cancer at the heart of US politics...
Oh, did I miss an even better bit?
No, it just relates quite well to what people are saying. You said, it's so sad to see the impact on their democracy. I hope it can be repaired. Now, I think...
Tell him that bit.
I think it goes to the heart. Follow up with that bit and you'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be best mates, Bim, honestly.
Yeah. It goes to the heart of what you're saying, though, which is about how politics works at the moment. And I do think we need to be honest about how big a problem we have there. I think we do have a problem. I think politicians like Donald Trump are the arsonist and the fireman. They will light the fire, shout about the problem and promise they can put it out. And they'll put it out quickly for you because they've got the best way. The reality is these problems that we're talking about are so difficult to solve. And the honest truth is, it's not sexy, it's not quick. There is no quick fix for a lot of this stuff. And unfortunately, that is the answer, that politicians need to be honest with people and they need to front up and say, you know, it may well take us some time, we can't do it quickly, it may not be what you want to hear. I think if we don't do that, we get into a really difficult, vicious cycle where you don't get the quick fix. And actually what Donald Trump does, and what David Cameron said today about immigration policy and the conversation around it, is that it undermines people's trust in politics because they don't see what they want delivered and they don't trust politicians and they don't vote. And I think that leaves us in a much worse place.
So, Hashi, what... a second Trump presidency, what... is that something you would welcome? I'm suspecting not from what you've said so far. Where do you think the main issues would be for us?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm a huge fan of the United States as a country and its institutions. I particularly, obviously, admire the judiciary in many respects. And should I be scared? I'm not necessarily scared because there's a part of me that's thinking how much worse can things actually get. But I am so concerned one primary reason being that we have a very thin-skinned man who's got a lot of scores to settle. And when he left office, the riot in the Capitol Hill that he had inspired had severely damaged American democracy and everything that it stood for. And with every court case that comes forward that is trying to hold him to account, it would seem it only increases his popularity. And at the end of the day, democracy is one man, one vote. The other day he said in Iowa, make sure you turn up. Even if you're ill, just make sure you turn up and vote, and then you can die. That's the kind of mentality this man has. For my part, it will be such a damning result for the United States of America for him to be standing there being sworn back again, literally meters away from where the insurrection took place. And that will be a devastating image for modern democracy. In terms of what it means for us as a country, as I agree with what Bim said, whether it's our security services, the Five Eyes, and the sort of civil service cooperation that we see on that front, I'm confident that that won't be affected, because in that part of our institutions, there are actually adults in the room. But in a bigger context, the last thing I would add is this. Think about when he comes into power, Israel, Palestine, Iran, Pakistan, Ukraine, his own border issues, deeply divided country, and he's got that on his plate. That is deeply concerning.
Can I ask, I mean, I'm going to do this in the interest of balance. Trump has a lot of support in America. Has he got any support here in the audience? Would anyone welcome a Trump presidency? Yes, you, sir.
Yeah, I don't say I'm a Trump fan, but I've got American family and used to work for a US company and know a lot of people in the US. We're being quite disrespectful as a country, actually, the way we're talking about him and actually getting him what he's done for their country. A number of the people in the US say he gets things done. And it's a pity we don't have some politicians to do that. But the only way to work with him is not to have some of the rhetoric I've heard on the panel so far. You've got to deal with him. And as much as I respect what Emily has said, is I don't think some of the words that are used in are going to be useful to us at all. We have to deal with him. Figure out a way of dealing with him, and you have to curtail some of your feelings, because if not, you're going to be disrespectful both to a head of state and the American people who we're supposed to be almost brethren with.
OK, right, I hear what you have to say. I'm going to move on and take another question from Valerie Reese.
With NHS waiting list at the highest level since records began, should we all copy the royal family and opt for private health care?
Right, so news today, you'll be aware, of course, that the Princess of Wales is being treated in hospital, in a private hospital, and the King will also be treated in a private hospital. And, of course, we wish them both well in their health. I mean, you're making a serious point here, Valerie, which is with waiting lists, you know, what else are people supposed to do? I think that's the point you're making, Valerie, is it? Kate?
This is I think it's a really difficult question for any party to answer. There are more staff and more funding in the NHS now than there was pre-pandemic, which people might find quite hard to believe, but that is true. Those are Institute for Fiscal Studies statistics. And yet more people are waiting longer, far, far, far longer. So I think what the NHS...
fewer procedures are taking place.
Fewer procedures are taking place. So what the NHS has is a productivity problem, and a very, very bad one, right? It goes to that point about it being a very long-term problem. But what you've got to do is find a way to solve that. I think the difficulty for particularly an incoming Labour government with the NHS and with this NHS problem is that people expect Labour to be able to do something to solve it. And I know, obviously, you're in government right now and the Tories have potentially, a policy there. But with Labour, I think people expect more. And there is not very much room for Labour to do very much on this issue because the money isn't there. And changing productivity levels in the NHS requires investment in technology. It requires a new strategy. It requires staff working with all of those things. And there's a big problem with staff morale. So I think the answer is a very, very difficult one, and it's not a quick fix. And the concern is if no politician can solve it, more and more people will look to the private sector.
And indeed they are. At the beginning of 2023, the number of hospital admissions paid for with private medical insurance was the highest on record. Ashi?
I think the NHS is one of those really difficult conversations because I think it's almost like a religious institution in this country. And I'm a big believer in the NHS. I use the NHS. I can afford to go private, but I use the NHS. But the truth is that we have not been putting enough money in one sense when we compare ourselves to the European continent. And yet the money that we are putting in, it would seem we're not getting what we deserve to get out of it. And so what I find really difficult about the NHS, not even talking about whether we should be looking at privatisation or anything like that at all, what I find really difficult is it is an issue that we are incapable somehow of having a rational debate about. What it means in an ageing population, what it means in a way that the NHS is effectively a crutch for social care, what it means for the issues around staffing levels, the fact that we have to recruit so much from abroad, the fact that we are not investing in the right technologies at the right time, procurement, all of the other things. And let's be frank, the NHS has been starved by the Tories too for a significant period of time. If you look at the investment and the ways in which the waiting lists have gone up, it correlates with the period in time that the Tories have been in power, but the pandemic has exacerbated the situation as well. So in my heart, for me, the NHS is one of those pillars of our institutions in this country. But sooner or later, we have to confront that it's currently not working as it should be, and we have to do something serious. And we're all relying on your colleague, Wes Streeton, Emily, and the Labour government as the founding sort of fathers of the National Health Service to really fundamentally transform it. So, good luck.
OK, I'll come to you, Emily. The man there in the black T-shirt.
I suppose my question would be, for a Labour or a Conservative government, to alleviate the backlogs of the NHS wait list, would private healthcare vouchers be an avenue that you might go down to try and alleviate, like I said, the backlogs that you've got until they are cleared, and then people can go back to using the NHS as it normally should be?
I mean, private hospitals are sometimes used. Sometimes NHS patients are referred to private hospitals to alleviate the backlog, but you mean something on top of that?
Yes.
OK, let's come back. There's a woman in a red top, I think. I can just about see you, yeah.
It's not just about going to private hospitals. In Peterborough, you're not going to get to see an NHS dentist. The nearest one that will take an adult who's not on benefit is in Kettering, over 25 miles away.
So hang on. Let's just explore that a bit further. So if you live in Peterborough...
Yep.
And you're not on benefits,
yep,
and you want to get an NHS dentist, you have to go 25 miles away.
You would have to. I was deregistered because the dentist I was with, NHS dentist, cancelled my regular appointment during COVID, and then said, because you haven't been, you're deregistered. I can't find another NHS dentist anywhere except the nearest is Kettering.
Wow. OK. Let me take one more point here. Yes, the man there here on the end.
Productivity, I think, is one of the key things to, not just in the NHS, but in many government areas. The immigration process, to me, just seems to take so long. Why does it need to take so long? The NHS, I'm sure, is a cultural issue, significantly cultural, in terms of kind of their hearts and minds and getting productivity up. But I do believe, in the same way as the government has had the political will to sort out the post office scandal, they can sort out the COVID inquiry, they can sort out the NHS, and they can sort out the immigration process in a much faster and more effective way to the taxpayer.
OK, and let me just hear from this man in the glasses.
The NHS is on its knees, but we're willing to spend £400 million, and we just said it might be a dead duck.
On the Rwanda plan, yeah, you're talking about. All right, Bim, so the question is, I mean, not that you are suggesting that we should all go private, but you're making the point, you know, should we all be opting for private healthcare because NHS waiting lists are at the highest level since records began? And you were making the point about private healthcare vouchers.
Well, first of all, no, nobody should have to go private. And just to take, you know, some of the issues that we've heard so far, we've heard about funding. Since the beginning of this Parliament, and obviously COVID is, you know, the big health issue of this Parliament so far, funding's gone up by about a third on the NHS, right? By about a third. That's a lot. And we were spending a lot on it before. The point made about productivity, I think, is a very fair one. And my Treasury colleague, Laura Trott, is working on a productivity review, not just on the NHS, but on all government departments. That is a key part of it, because as a percentage of everything the government spends, the NHS is about 42-43%. It's a huge amount of all the money government spends. And so that productivity review is looking very seriously at this issue, and I think it's a fair point, you know, well made. We've heard about staffing. And again, as Kate McCann said, there are now more staff, whether it be doctors, nurses, all sorts of other medical staff in the NHS than there was before.
But it's not enough, as you know, because something like there are something like 1 in 10 vacancies.
No, look, I'm not saying that all the problems are solved. I'm just making the point that we are making progress. But there is something that has particularly undermined on the issue of waiting lists this year, over the last year, and that is the strikes.
That's not fair. That's not fair.
Hold on. Junior doctors' strikes have had a huge impact on waiting lists. They have.
But waiting lists were growing before the junior doctor strike.
Well, because actually we were starting to bring them down. So if you look at November 2020, I think it was November 2023, the last month where there weren't any strikes, the waiting list went down by almost 100,000. Just the fact that the junior doctors weren't at strike. You know, we've settled as a government. We settled with consultants, nurses, all sorts of other medical staff. The junior doctors have got to a place where they're demanding 35% increase. These are people who are well above average wages. 35% increase, which I think, and the government thinks, is unreasonable. They should come to the table and stop these strikes, which are having a huge negative impact on waiting lists and on the lives of my constituents and indeed on everybody in this country.
Emily.
The NHS is so broken. And after 14 years, who broke it? Who broke it? You know, this government has failed. We need a change. We need a change of government, and we need a bit of hope for the NHS. You know, when we left government, the NHS wasn't even an issue. It didn't even appear in any elections. Nobody thought about it because it had been sorted. And now look what they've done to it. Look how bad it is. You know, look at the demoralised and exhausted workforce. Look at the fact that they have done nothing about social care. They have not adapted at all. It's all very well them trying to blame the staff and saying that it's their fault because they're on strike, or if it isn't the staff's fault, then it's COVID's fault. The waiting lists were going up and up before COVID even struck.
And what about Kate's point that should Labour get into government? I mean, Wes Streeting has talked a lot about a number of plans.
Yes.
Where's the money going to come from?
What we have done is we've talked particularly about particular issues. So we have a pot of money that we've talked about that we're going to use in order to pay the staff more, to work longer hours, I know, but to put their backs in and to help, you know, fight back on terms of the waiting list. So we've announced that. We've announced that we're going to introduce more NHS dentists. I've spoken to people in Peterborough who have had difficulties getting hold of an NHS dentist. And it isn't just Peterborough that has this problem. Up and down the country, people are having real problems finding an NHS dentist to get onto the waiting list.
And what about things like new... So, for example, people who are trying to get... who are using private health insurance are primarily or mostly using it for diagnostics, colposcopies, endoscopies, that kind of thing. The NHS talks about how they don't have enough scanners. They don't have enough people to monitor what the scanners, the results the scanners come out with. Where's the money going to come from technology, for example?
So obviously the number of people who go for private healthcare goes up the longer you have a Tory government.
Sure, but where's the money going to come from for the technology? I mean, at the moment we've got an NHS that still sends letters, not emails. So where's the money going to come from?
And so
let's be realistic.
So many of the things that Wes has talked about is he's talked about the need to put more investment into the NHS, but also to be able to change some of the processes, which will include, you know, much more work in terms of digital, so that we don't have. I mean, we've all had a letter that's arrived after our.
That will cost money. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Of course.
And where's it going to come from?
And so that's
taxes?
that's why what we're doing is we're being really straightforward with people and saying we cannot fix the NHS that they took 15 years to break in one term. You know, we will need to have more than one term in order to be able to really turn the NHS round, because it is linked completely with what we want to be able to do with the economy. You know, we have had no growth in our economy during the entire time, practically, that this lot have been in. We need to make sure that we turn our economy around. We have a green prosperity plan, and we need to be able to invest. We need to be able to turn the economy around, and only then will we be able to put the sort of investment that our public services need into our public services. And yes, it won't, you know, if we were to be given the great honour of serving this country, it's not going to be fixed in a year. We are going to need some time. But we will go in the right direction and we will listen.
Kate, you want to come back in?
Yeah, it's just to say that, you know, for Labour, this is a real point of danger, because exactly that argument is what Labour is going to be making. We need 2 terms to make this happen. But, you know, people are going to be expecting change quite quickly, I think, particularly from a Labour government. And Emily, you mentioned social care there. I mean, what is Labour's plan for social care? Are you going to fundamentally reform the system of social care in this country?
When we were elected in 97, you know, the only thing that we pledged at that point was that we would cut the waiting list by 100,000. And then after we had been in government for 3 terms, look at the way in which we transform the
How is that answering Kate's question? Sorry.
What I'm saying is that it takes time to be able to
What's your plan for social... That's what you're asking.
Yeah.
What's your plan
so
for
we
social
have
care
a plan
and how you're going to fund
So
it?
we have a plan at the moment to work with the workforce in order to ensure that they're properly valued. And that is a really important part of it. And that means they're making sure that they are not underpaid and they're being paid properly. And so that will, we hope, help to attract more people to be able to come in and work in social care, because one of the problems is that we don't have enough people working in the sector. And we slowly build on that. But we need to turn the tank around, and it will take time. We were talking earlier about the importance of truth. This is truth.
Woman here in the front.
So I've recently moved to Peterborough, and so my question to the Conservative Party is, what do we do regarding the dentist? What advice would you give to me, having recently moved and not been able to find an NHS dentist in Peterborough? What advice would you give?
In relation to that particular point, I don't know the availability of NHS dentists precisely in Peterborough.
We're hearing it from the people who live here.
What I'm saying is I can't advise on exactly the details of Peterborough. What I do know more generally is that we are increasing the funding. We are making it easier for more dentists to take on NHS patients. It's going to take some time to work some of this out. Part of the impact on this was the result of COVID, where a lot of things were untreated for a very long time, and then the backlogs were difficult, and some dentists then stopped taking. And the lady who mentioned earlier that she was sort of deregistered, I think that was wrong, and it doesn't strike me as in any way legitimate to do that. But more broadly, we are trying to now encourage and incentivise more dentists to take NHS patients. I can't speak for Peterborough precisely, but I know that that's something that we're working on.
I suppose the answer is maybe think about going private. That's what he's saying, really.
No, vote Labour.
Or vote Labour, maybe. That's what
OK, there's lots of you who've got your hands up, so I'll just... Woman here in the orange shirt.
Yeah, I live in Peterborough, and I was also deregistered during COVID for the dentist, so I've now had to pay and go private. But also, I think the NHS is broken. In Peterborough, you struggle to get a doctor's appointment, and recently I've had 2 occasions when I've got through to the doctors and been told that NHS service is no longer available, you have to pay for that treatment. And that's happened twice in the last 6 months, when those 2 treatments before COVID were available and funded by the NHS.
And now they are no longer.
And now they're no longer.
Can I'm just intrigued by this dentist. Has anyone else got experience of trying to get a dentist here? Oh my gosh, blimey, O'Reilly. OK.
Big issue.
Right. Well, Valerie, you put your hand up and you asked the question. So what's your experience in terms of trying to get a dentist?
Well, the same. I've got a dentist which is about 40 miles from where I live.
And why are you going so far? Because you can't get an NHS
dentist? Because I cannot get an NHS, and we live 50 miles up north from Peterborough, so North Lincolnshire.
Right, you just can't get one.
There's no NHS dentist.
So, Bim, look, the Conservatives have been in power for what? 14 years? 14 years? This is now the 14th year. And you've got people here, and a forest of hands went up when I asked about it, saying they cannot get an NHS dentist. What do you say to them?
What I say is, as I have said, is I know there are problems and we are working on them.
But you've been in power for 14 years. You've got people who cannot get an NHS dentist.
Sorry,
I know how long
sorry, I think is what you meant to say. Sorry. I'm just thinking what you should be saying.
No, let's let Bim answer, in fairness.
What I'm saying is the impact of COVID on our system was significant. It's not just in this country, it happened in other countries as well. NHS dentistry is a big part of that. And now we have got the economy turning the corner. That means we've now going to be able to continue to increase the funding where it's necessary. But I'm not pretending that it's easy. But what I'd also say to you is you've got to beware of when Labour or anybody else says, don't worry, trust us, give us 10 years in power and we will fix it. They're not willing to explain the plan. They're not really willing to explain how they're going to fund it. Emily mentioned the Green Prosperity Plan, which cost £28 billion. Fine, that's reasonable, but they haven't been able to explain how they're going to pay for it. And £28 billion is roughly about 5 to 6% extra on income tax. Now, it's reasonable if Labour say, right, we're going to raise your income tax by 5% and we're going to spend that £28 billion. If that's so, they need to be honest about that. Talking about truth, Emily, be honest about that £28 billion. Where are you going to get the money from? How much more are you going to increase people's taxes in order to pay for that?
So what we're going to do is we're going to build up to £28 billion a year. We're going to do it during the second part of the first 5-year term that hopefully will be the first. And what we will do is we will borrow it. And we will borrow it, and for every pound that we spend, we will be expecting £3 to come in from the private sector, because what we will be doing is we will be transforming our energy system so that your bills will go down forever, because we will be making sure that we will have the sort of renewable energy that, frankly, our country really ought to be world leaders in, and we have been held back. You know, do you know that Ukraine, right, has built more onshore wind farms since the war than we've been able to build at all in this country? It takes 14 years to put up a wind turbine at the moment. We will transform this, and it will change our economy for the better. Now, and we will be investing that money. We will show clear leadership, and the private sector will know that, for example, we're rewiring the country. You know, the amount of money that's being held back because people either can't put their energy onto the grid or can't get money off the grid to set up a new factory because our wiring as a country itself is completely exhausted and needs renewing.
When Emily said we're going to borrow the money, there was quite a sizable ripple of laughter through the audience, and I'm just... So who was laughing there? I just want to hear why you were... So you, for example, here in the front. Hang on, let's get a microphone to you. There you go.
Borrowing more, aren't we already in enough debt?
But in order to be able to grow the economy, we have to put the injection of money into it in order to invest. I mean, just like people borrow to buy a house, you know, we need to borrow to invest. We are being really careful about making sure that the promises we make, all of the promises that we make, we're saying are costed, but we are also being completely clear that we will build up to borrowing £28 billion a year in order to be able to invest it, in order to be able to transform our economy. It'll be worth it.
Okay.
You know, because we will get the growth in our economy that we won't get
from.
So you borrow it on international markets, and it will be, and we will. I mean, we will be doing other things in order to ensure that we grow our economy. We're going to be changing the planning system, and we're going to be building 1.5 million homes that will take people off waiting lists and will help them to be youngsters to be able to have their own place.
I mean, I'm just going to jump in only because.
Sorry,
it's fine. These are questions you were asked.
I was
asked. To be able to respond. We've got 5 minutes left, and I just want to squeeze in one final question. And maybe change the mood a bit. I don't know. James Hutchings. Yes.
Yeah. So my question is, am I evil for wanting meat to stay on my menu?
Right. Well, we are in Veganuary, still, just. And I'm assuming that one of the reasons this has come up is it was in the news this week that an agricultural college in Yorkshire said it would remove meat 2 days a week from one of its restaurants for Veganuary. And then there's a bit of a hoo-ha about that, being an agricultural college. And also it has reversed its decision. It says it recognises the role that livestock and crops play. Kate.
As a not much meat eater, am I on the moral
Does that mean
ground
vegetarian
here?
but for the odd bacon sandwich?
Basically,
yeah. I thought it might. OK.
I feel like I'm exempt from this question. No,
come on. No one's exempt on this panel.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it? This moral question about what we eat, what we don't eat. you know, what we do and what we don't do.
It's also a climate question.
It's a climate question. I don't think you're evil, no, personally. But it's a debate that we're going to have a lot more. Do
you think we should be eating less meat?
Well, the levels of methane is the thing that really shocked me. The amount of methane that is released in the production of meat is what's really worrying climate scientists. But did you know that some chocolate bars release the same amount of methane because of the way that the cocoa is farmed? So if you're worrying about meat, maybe we should be worrying about chocolate as well.
Oh, no. Oh, come on. Kashi?
I definitely want to come to your parties. Look, I think we should definitely eat less meat, not least because it's good for your health not to eat so much. But no, I don't think you're evil for wanting good meat. I like a good steak. But I just think for the environment, for your own health, for the NHS, it would help if we ate a little bit less meat in order to ensure that we were saving the planet. So, no, you'd enjoy it more when you eat a bit less of it too.
So, Bim, you've got the World Wildlife Foundation saying beef production is the top driver of deforestation in the world's tropical forests. There are some that argue, you know, rather than use land to raise cattle, raise sheep, actually, if we used that to plant crops, we could feed the world more cheaply and more beneficially.
I'm sorry, I really completely disagree. I think that, of course, you're not evil for wanting to eat meat. I just wish, as a society, people like politicians, people on panels, stop lecturing people on the choices. They just want to have meat when they want to. I just think it's sort of disturbing trend in politics where everybody has to be lectured all the time about what they're allowed, what they're not allowed. We've got to trust people to make their own decisions. Give them the information, but trust people to make their own decisions. And good British meat is a fantastic product. We need to support our farmers, not denigrate them. And all I can say is veganuary is an even worse idea than dry January.
Emily? I mean, James has put it in a light-hearted way, but you know, there is a serious point behind it as well.
I don't know what to do, because, like, on the one hand, I've got Bim telling me that if I say anything, I'm going to be lecturing people. And on the other hand, I've got you who's going to give me a really hard time if I don't answer the question.
Well, give it a go, Emily, come on. We've got a minute left.
I'm more scared of you, Fiona, than I am of Bim. I agree that I think that, you know... I think I should just stop eating. I, along with a lot of other people, probably should eat less, full stop. But I'm certainly never going to stop eating meat, although I do think that the proportion of meat that I have in my diet is something that I really need to watch. But I am never, ever, ever going to worry about chocolate.
Fair enough. Right, I've got about half a minute left now. You're still here in the orange jacket.
Since 1970, the UK's wildlife population has decreased by 19%. And on this topic of environmentalism, I'd love to know what your party's strategies will do for the next 54 years.
My God, we've got about, 15 seconds? I don't think they're going to be able to manage it, but that question may have to wait for another time, I'm afraid. Don't think you can do 54 years in about 10 seconds. But thank you very much. Look, our time is up. Thank you so much to all of you for all your interventions and all your points. Very powerfully made. Always grateful to hear them. Thank you to the panel. I just want to say also thank you to, actually talking about keeping meat off the menu, to Susan Broccoli and Daryl Brennan for supplying these rather lovely pictures of Peterborough. Thank you very much. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to all of you. And, of course, thank you to you at home for watching. We are in Gillingham next week and Glasgow the week after. But from Question Time in Peterborough tonight, bye-bye.
Discover unique stories,